Thank you for the kind introduction. To all distinguished guests, Chairwoman Simone Peter, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Or as we greet in my mother tongue, Kasalelye Mainko. I'm very honored to be here. My name is Yolanda Joab Mori. I'm from the village of Awak on the island of Pohnpei in the Federated States of Micronesia. I've come here all the way from my home island of Chuuk to stand here before you, not as any sort of politician or lawmaker, such as many of you in this room. I stand here today as a mother and as a granddaughter, simply as a young Micronesian woman who is fiercely in love with the beautiful Pacific Islands that I get to call home. These islands that I, my ancestors, my family, and to-be-born bloodline call home is unlike anywhere else in this world. To the untrained eye, though, we may just look like dots on the map, specks in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. Every time I go somewhere new or meet someone new and tell them of where I am from, explaining where it is can become quite the maze. I end up walking through a rudimentary geography lesson that always seems to end up in referring to everywhere in the Pacific except my home, Micronesia, usually overlooked and barely visible amongst the Pacific Ocean. But you see, that's where most get it mistaken, because who ever said that we and the Pacific Ocean were ever separate to begin with? We are one and the same. It is a part of us. Small islands, sure, but large ocean states that command a dominating presence on the global scale. And when that perspective shifts from choosing to see beyond your own conventional understanding but seeks to see from within, the entire story changes. We are no longer this forgotten and forsaken corner of the world. We are everything. We are an ocean of Pacific vastness, and if you ever need to travel or trade or run cables from point A to point B anywhere in this world, well, you've got to cross through us first. You see, in order to accurately influence this conversation and to do right by my community, I must lead my address with this need for a paradigm shift, redefining this misconception of what our identity and definition is and how it is presented to the world. Because in order to talk about climate change, we must first understand the people who are affected by it most and what is truly at stake. Because what is at stake is not merely just small islands like these that to a lot of the world are hard to see and therefore hard to care about. It then becomes about all of this, and then all of this, and every single living thing within all of that. We are more than just a vacation destination or postcard-worthy picture. Our identity is as big as the ocean that my ancestors once conquered, so that's where I get the conviction to stand here today. Where most may see nothing, I see an entire world of untapped potential. Our islanders' irony, though, as you all know, is that this same ocean that sustains us is becoming the very thing that is the source of many of our worries, as it creeps up and seeps into our drinking water and taro patches, as it crawls up and over our sea walls, as it becomes more and more of a home to a carbon sink that is slowly killing itself, bringing everything within down with it, to the point it is becoming unrecognizable. This is not the ocean that we know, and this is not who we are. The UN Oceans Conference recently concluded in New York, and it is my wish to see those priorities not just fall to rhetoric, but find its way into actionable forums like these. I have been working across my islands for the past 6 years in the field of climate change adaptation and education, and have personally seen what this is doing to my communities, and have listened to what it's like to have to start over from nothing. I was there in the Marshall Islands during the droughts of 2013. I was there in Kashrai during the sweeping king tides of 2014, and again this year. I was there in Chuk during the typhoon of 2015, which we are still rebuilding from to this day. For us, this is a matter of our national security. This is no longer some intangible theory or distant threat. It is knocking at my front door. Three-quarters of the world's megacities are situated by the coast, and more than 1 billion people live in low-lying coastal areas. Low-lying coastal areas and low-lying islands and atolls like mine being most at risk for inundation, saltwater intrusion, storm surges, and high tide flooding. The thing is, my entire country is a coastal community. As islanders, everyone depends on the land and sea. And when events do happen, and after the water has receded, as if it came to serve some sort of angry reminder, the usual empty advice offered is, well, why don't you relocate? Or why don't you farm somewhere else? That's not the point. We are framing this conversation backwards, and we are asking the wrong questions, because when you're from the islands, every inch of land is sacred, valuable, and needed, passed down from generation to generation. So as leaders in the very country that continues to set the standard of combining innovation and implementation, and that is hosting the COP23 negotiations, I urge that there be a stout position taken in the fact that we need to prove that the economy and environment can coexist and thrive together. The only myth that exists regarding climate change is the falsehood that we must sacrifice one over the other. That the mobilization of resources to respond to this crisis be more feasible and comprehensive for local communities, dispelling the quick impact project methodologies, but focusing on long-term investments. That we can no longer afford to keep working in silos, but build stronger partnerships and create a more collaborative working environment for a multi-sectoral approach. More must be done to stop climate change, not just adapt to it. I am also hopeful because of all of the shining examples of commitment that has risen since one particular world leader turned his back. I am hopeful because I have seen business leaders rise to the occasion and own their virtue just as much as they own their companies. I am hopeful because I have seen state leaders band together to fill in the gap of their federal governments. I am hopeful because conventions like these exist, and men and women like you stand in solidarity with me. And despite someone across the pond who dreams of building walls to divide neighbors, while we simply dream of not having to build seawalls to just survive, is walking away from this fight, let him. You and I both know that as a global family, there is nothing more worth fighting for. So while this does present a challenge, let this also be an opportunity to respond with leadership. This is not the time for divisive politics, because this is an issue that knows no boundaries. It does not care what flags we fly, what our military looks like, or what political party we belong to. It holds all of us accountable. Let's make sure our great-grandchildren and future descendants look back on us today and not curse us, but thank us. Let us stand on the right side of history. I know that this is not going to be the end-all nightmare that divides the world. In fact, it just may be the very thing that brings all of us together and something that we can all believe in: humanity. What needs to be driving decisions now is not what is fair for just one country, but what is right for the entire world. After all, what is fairness if we don't think it applies to all of humanity? I thank you for listening.